All right, we have arrived at the last section of Chapter 1, which is 1.5, which is currency exchange. Currency exchange, essentially, if you've traveled, maybe you've taken Canadian money to a different country, hey, the currencies around the world are not all worth the same. You may have gone somewhere and let's say you had $100 and maybe it turned into $120 of wherever you were. On the opposite side of that, maybe you had $100 and you exchanged it, and all of a sudden you got back $79 and your money decreased in a way. It's vital that you know how to calculate these currency exchanges for when you are going to travel and you're going to have to know what's going to happen to your money. The last thing you want to do is go to a different country and take out, let's say you have Canadian money, and give it to a person to exchange it for you, and you have no idea how that's being calculated. It may not be done properly. I mean, you have to know, in regards to money, you have to know how the calculations are taking place. This is a real world application that really doesn't really matter who you are. It's going to play a role in your life one day. Again, I want to come back quickly to the proportions, okay? And that's what we're going to use here over and over and over. So it says here, recall, proportions can be used to solve an unknown value when you know an equivalent rate or ratio. So here's an example. When traveling to Calgary, your fuel consumption is 6.3 liters for 100 kilometers. If this rate continues, how much fuel will you use if the distance is 280 kilometers? Well, so you have a car or a truck, you're using 6.3 liters for every 100 kilometers. So you travel 100 kilometers and your tank has burnt 6.3 liters of fuel. So we'll make up the proportion here. This is 280 kilometers. Now, on the left-hand side, the kilometers are on the bottom. So we'll maintain that here on the right. Now, you could certainly figure out, it's not too hard to figure out how to multiply 100 by a number to go to 280. You also, in this case, you might want to try the cross multiply and divide method. So what I'm going to do is I always like doing the one with the x first, so that's going to give me 100x. And then we're going to multiply 6.3 times 280. And that gives me a value of 1,764. If you've been doing it the same way the whole time, you divide by the number in front of the x. So we'll do that on both sides. This scribbles out. And this is going to tell you. So it would be 17.64. Now what are we looking for? It was liters here, so it should be liters there. So essentially, you use 6.3 liters in 100 kilometers. If you were to travel 280 kilometers in total, you would use 17.64 liters. You see, this proportion obviously is going to be used in our currency exchanges. You just have to, this is kind of just a refresh of the math you have to do. So if we'll come down here, different countries use different monetary units or currency. When traveling or purchasing online, it's important to know the exchange rate. I forgot about that when purchasing online. Quite often the websites are from a different country. So when you pay with Canadian dollars, it gets converted into a different currency, and boy, the amount can really change. So you really got to be aware of these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you here how to calculate, what's going on. So it's basically, we have Thai currency, okay? And if you have one, let's say you have one quantity of Thai currency, it's 0.02. It's not even, it's between 2 and 3 cents, okay? So we want to figure out here, how do we figure this out? So how many, I guess we'll call them bats. One Thai bat is worth 0.023541 of Canadian dollar. So I can set that up right now. If you have one bat, and that is a Thai currency, that is worth 0.023541 Canadian dollars. Usually I can put $, or I could put in brackets CAD for Canadian dollars. So think of that. You have one Thai bat in your hand, and you walk into Canada. They'll give the person not even 3 pennies. That just shows you the conversion there, okay? So now, how many Thai bahts will the person receive if they have $200 Canadian? So on the left-hand side, the Canadian was on the bottom, so we're going to do the same on the right. Also Canadian dollars, CAD. This is our X. Cross multiply and divide. So that's going to give me 0.023541 X. 1 times 200 is simply 200. We divide both sides by the number in front of the X. Okay, a little bit of writing there. This is going to tell us, it's going to be probably a pretty big number. It gives me 849582 bahts. So check that out. That's pretty nuts. If a person from Thailand, let's say they have $200, okay, that $200 is worth 8,495 of amounts of currency in the Thai monetary units. It just shows you the conversion here. So in order to be equal, one person could have 200 Canadian dollars, another person could have 8,495.82 bahts. That just shows you that they are exactly the same, okay? That's how you do this. Let's try, oh, sorry, that's loading up there. Okay, so here we go. On eBay, I found an iPad mini that cost $375 USD, which I realized was not the Canadian website, but American. If $1 Canadian is worth 90, wow. Well, first of all, let me tell you, that is no longer the case. At the time of this video being created, it's more like 0.76. So you see, over time, the value of the Canadian and the American dollar changes. Sometimes the Canadian dollar is worth, getting close to the value of an American dollar. Right now, the value of the Canadian dollar is not equal to the American dollar. It's less. So that would certainly impact the exchange rate that we would get. Anyway, we will continue on with this here. So it says, if you have $1 Canadian, okay, you put that over it is worth 0.94192 US dollars. Okay, that's what we know. We know that from the question. Doesn't matter which one you put on top. You could have put the US dollars on top and the Canadian on the bottom. Does not matter at all. Now, the iPad mini is $375 in US dollars. Keeping consistent, US is on the bottom on the left. It's going to have to be on the bottom on the right. And we'll put our X right there. Cross multiply and divide certainly is coming in over and over and over. So what we're going to have is 0.94192x equals 375. We divide both sides by the number in front of the X. Whoops, not the X there. And this number is right here. I'm going to run out of room. 492, cross it out. X equals, it will be $398.12. Canadian. Make sure you know that's Canadian dollars. Now, just kind of a side note, because I told you that the Canadian dollar is worth less, just in real life, just so you know, if this was a true story and someone actually bought an iPad from the American site, so on and so forth, this actually would be much more right now because our dollar is worth less, so we would have to pay more dollars. Okay, so it's quite a complicated process. It's just you want to know. I mean, you want to know when you're crossing the border or going overseas. You want to know how much money yours is worth. Now, and also, over time, you may want to pay attention to how our currency, how the Canadian dollar is faring. I'll give you an example. There are times when there's so many ways to look at this, but there are times when the Canadian dollar really gets pretty close to the American dollar, and it's like, well, that's a good deal. That might be a time when you want to go to the States or buy things from the States because our dollar is, they call it almost on par or getting close to being equal. Oppositely, kind of like right now, the American dollar is worth a whole lot more than ours. So our Canadian dollar, when we transfer it over, we're losing a lot of money. So that's where maybe you don't want to travel down to the States or you don't want to buy as many products. I don't want to, that's for another time or place, but I'm just trying to show you that there are really real world applications here to knowing how to calculate the exchange rate. And it really could affect, it really could help you plan out your life and make good decisions. Anyway, I'm going to give you some practice here with how to calculate some currency exchange. It really comes back to these equal proportions over and over and over, and cross, multiply, and divide. Please go back to this lesson and read things over. And sorry, you'll notice I didn't do the last question. That's okay. And we'll move on from there.